Okay, here are some notes just to help you out with assignment number 2. So I'm going to take my equation here, and I'm going to go ahead and distribute negative 3x minus 12, and then I'm going to subtract the 2x, and then over here I'm going to distribute again, 2x plus 2. So now I'm going to combine my like terms on the left side. Negative 3x and negative 2x make negative 5x, and then I still have minus 12. That equals 2x plus 12. So now I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides, minus, I get negative 7x minus 12 equals 2. And since the x did not eliminate, I know there's going to be one solution. And so I'm going to figure out what it is. So I'm going to add 12 to both sides. Negative 7x equals 14. Dividing by negative 7, we get x equals negative 2. So I would fill in this bubble right here, and I would say x equals negative 2. So you're going to do the same thing for problems like this. You're going to distribute, solve, but remember, if you get something where the x goes away and what you're left with is false, you're going to say no solution. And if you work and the x goes away and what you end up with is true, then you're going to say all real numbers. Here to see what kind of different problems you're going to have to deal with. In this case, it says that it wants you to solve for b. Well, in this case, there's a lot of numbers, but we want to focus on finding that b right there, and we want to get rid of everything that's attached to it. So the first thing I'm going to do is subtract 4c, minus 4c, and minus 4c. So over here, I can't combine them. They're not like terms, but I can rewrite it as a minus 4c equals 3b. Well, I still don't have b alone yet. I have to take that whole thing and divide both sides by 3. So when my 3's cancel on this side, I have b alone, but over here on this side I have a minus 4c equals 3, and that would be the answer that I would type in. But when there's parentheses, be careful. Make sure you go in the right order. This tells me to solve for y, so I want the y by itself. I can't get rid of the 6 because it's inside parentheses grouped together with the y. So what I'm going to do is divide both sides by h. So c over h equals, the h is over here canceled, so all I have left is 6 plus y. I still don't have y alone. So now that it's out of the parentheses, I can do minus 6 on this side and minus 6 on that side. So I have the fraction c over h minus 6 equals the letter y. You're going to have somewhere you're going to have to deal with these word translations into algebraic expressions. So you have to think about the fact that Sam had $139 to begin with. That means that's his starting point. He starts with $139, but he spends D amount of dollars. Spending means that it's going away, so you would take away D. Rita is saving money to buy a bike, costs $125. She has $60 already, and she's going to save an additional $5 every week. And how many weeks will she have enough money to buy the bike? All right, that's the question. So here's the step-by-steps that they want you to do. Write an equation that could be used to answer the question above. First, choose the appropriate form, then fill in the blanks with these numbers. So the appropriate form, this first one has a plus sign, and the second one has a minus sign. We have to decide which one will work in this case. Well, she's starting out with $60, and she's saving 5 more. That means she's adding to her savings. So I'm going to choose the plus sign. And she's starting off with $60. That's how much she already has. That one doesn't have a variable. But she's adding $5 each week. That's the one that you multiply by W because it's another $5 for every single week she works. And she wants to get a total of $125. So that's the total for that equation. Now they want us to solve it, so I'm going to say 5W plus 60 equals 125, and I'm going to subtract 60 from both sides. That's going to make 5W equals 65, and W equals 13. It'll take her 13 weeks to buy that bike. looking for some other ones that might confuse you. I want to go over it with you here. First, first complete the story below so that it can be represented by this equation. Then solve for x. So in this equation, we have the left-hand side is equal to the right-hand side. And in this case, the left-hand side is store A, and the right-hand side is represented by store B. So for store A right here, store A charges blank dollars per copy. So if we go back and look at the problem right here, we see that store A is 13 times X. That means it's $13 for every copy. If you want to look at the next one, store B is right here. So store B charges $15 for every copy, but then the customer gets to subtract $14 from what they owe. So let's think about what that means. Charges $15 for every X for every copy, right? I'm going to say $14, and then we're going to choose the letter B because it's a discount. You're taking $14 away. The total cost, with all the changes and all the discounts, is going to be either A, the same for both stores, B, more for store A, or C, more for store B. Well, since there's an equal sign in between store A and store B, we're going to say that it's the same for the two stores. So we're going to choose A there. And then for this equation, what x equals, the only way you can figure that out is to solve it. So we're going to subtract 15x from both sides, minus 15x. We get negative 2x equals negative 14. When you divide by negative 2, you get the x equals positive 7. For number 12, when they give you an analyzing question like this, look at the one that gives you the most information to begin with. And the one on the right, negative 7v plus 1 equals 8, that one gives you enough information so you could solve it. If you do minus 1 on both sides, you will get negative 7v equals positive 7. When you divide by negative 7, you'll know that v equals negative 1. But they wanted to know what would 6v plus 1 equal, so you have to plug it in. 6 times negative 1 plus 1. So that would be negative 6 plus 1, and our overall answer would be negative 5. When you're looking at a question like number 15, read it really carefully. An air traffic controller is tracking two planes. To starting is a really important part of our equation. That's the beginning. To start, plane A was at an altitude of 468 meters. Plane B was just taking off, so that means that plane B was on the ground. Plane A is gaining altitude at 17 meters per second. That's how much it's rising. And plane B is gaining altitude at 26 meters per second. That's how much it rises. So for each plane, write an expression. For the altitude of plane A in meters, it starts out at 468, and then for every second it's going to add 17 meters. And that's times s. For every second it raises by 17. The altitude of plane A is really going to start out at 0 because it's on the ground, it's just taking off. I'm sorry, that's plane B. And it's going to go up by 26 per second. So 26 meters per second, or we could just write that as 26s. We can leave off the 0. Write an equation to show that the two planes are at the same altitude, meaning that they're equal to each other. So you would just say that 26s equals 468 plus 17s, or you could turn it around and say 17s plus 468 equals 26s. All right, and at the end of the assignment, you're going to have some absolute value equations. Remember, whenever you have absolute values, the only way to get rid of those bars is to break them down into two equations. And you take the inside, that stays the same, but you break it down into two possibilities where you turn the answer, you can keep it as positive 2, or you can turn it into negative 2. So what's inside the bar stays the same. You can have 4x plus 10 equals 2, or 4x plus 10 equals negative 2. And then you have two answers once you solve. So minus 10, 4x equals negative 8 and x equals negative 2. That's one possibility. Minus 10 minus 10. 4x equals negative 12. When you divide by 4, you're going to get negative 3. And just don't forget, when you do absolute values, though, you can't break it apart into two parts until you have the absolute value bars isolated. So in this case, you have to divide by the negative 4 before you can even begin. And don't forget, if whatever's on the right-hand side is a negative number, you'd have to say no solutions. But in this case, negative 28 divided by negative 4 is going to be positive 7, so it's going to be okay. So now that the absolute value bars are isolated, I break it up into two parts. One part where I'm going to have positive 7 as my answer, and one part where I'm going to have negative 7 as my answer. So I keep the x plus 4 as it is, and I subtract 4 from both sides and solve both equations. X could be 3, and x could be negative 11.